The first time I saw the human, she was sitting cross-legged in the center of the training arena, eyes closed, completely still. Around her, the rest of Advanced Combat Class 7 moved through warm-up sequences, bodies flowing through the standard preparatory forms. Dorvian GRX was showing off his 17-time championship stance, his secondary limbs extended in perfect balance. The Krell twins, Pim and Palm, were synchronized as always, their exoskeletons clicking softly as they moved in mirror formation. Rakar, the Zenthi warrior who'd been top of our class since first cycle, was demonstrating his infamous spine lock to a group of admirers. And yet, despite all this activity, my attention kept returning to the motionless human girl. "Korvik, focus," hissed Tekka, her Krell mandibles clicking with annoyance. "Professor Zarlox is watching." I nodded, returning to my stance. As a Vidian, I pride myself on our natural combat superiority. Our species evolved as apex predators on a mid-gravity world, giving us heightened sensory awareness and reaction times that most races can only dream of. I shifted my weight, feeling the perfect balance in my limbs, the careful distribution of mass that would allow me to strike with maximum efficiency. "What's the human doing?" I whispered to Tekka, unable to contain my curiosity. "Nothing," Tekka replied with a dismissive gesture. "Humans are weak. They come from a barely qualified Deathworld. Class 9, I think. Not even worth noting. She probably can't keep up with the warm-ups." I frowned. The Galactic Academy was the premier training facility for the Federation's elite warriors. How had a fragile-looking human managed to qualify for advanced combat? Professor Zarlox, a towering Traxian with a reputation for merciless training methods, stepped into the center of the arena. The holographic barriers shimmered to life around us, casting a blue-red glow across the polished floor. "Today," his voice boomed through my translator implant, "we begin practical application of cross-species combat techniques. I want each of you to demonstrate your primary stance." One by one, we moved to the center. GRX went first, naturally, showing off his championship form with unnecessary flourish. The Jigsari twins followed, then Tekka, each displaying the combat forms developed for their species' unique biology. When my turn came, I executed the Vidian hunting posture perfectly, feeling the familiar tension in my muscles, the heightened awareness of every molecule of air around me. "Excellent," said Zarlox, his inner eyelids blinking approval. "Fletcher, you're next." The human girl, Fletcher, stood up in a single fluid motion that caught my attention for its simplicity. She walked to the center of the arena and stood perfectly straight, arms at her sides, making no discernible combat stance at all. GRX laughed openly. "Is that it? Is that the fearsome human combat form?" Zarlox frowned, his cranial ridges darkening. "Fletcher, I don't believe you understand the assignment. You are to demonstrate your species' primary combat stance." The human, Fletcher, nodded. "I am, Professor. This is it." More laughter rippled through the class. Even I couldn't help but feel a surge of superiority. How had this creature qualified for our class? "This is absurd." GRX stepped forward, his champion's confidence on full display. "Professor, let me demonstrate proper technique to the human." Zarlox hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, Fletcher. Are you prepared to engage in a demonstration bout?" The human girl nodded once, not shifting her stance at all. "I'm ready." "She's going to get destroyed," Tekka whispered to me, mandibles clicking in anticipation. GRX circled the human, his championship form perfect, secondary limbs poised for striking. "I'll go easy on you, Deathworlder," he taunted. "Maybe just break 1 or 2 bones." The human didn't respond. She didn't even look at him, keeping her gaze fixed somewhere in the middle distance. GRX attacked with a textbook-perfect striking combination. His primary right limb shot out in a blur that even my Vidian reflexes struggled to track. What happened next occurred so quickly that most of the class missed it entirely. One moment GRX was attacking, the next, he was flat on his back, pinned to the floor by the human who had somehow moved without seeming to move at all. The arena fell silent. "How did you—" GRX began, struggling against the human's hold. "Yield," she said quietly. "I will not yield to a—" Whatever speciesist remark GRX intended to make was cut short as Fletcher applied the slightest additional pressure. He yelped in pain. "I yield! I yield!" She released him immediately and returned to her original position, standing straight, arms at her sides, as if nothing had happened. Professor Zarlok's inner eyelids were fully retracted, a sign of extreme surprise in Traxians. "Interesting technique, Fletcher," he said after a moment. "Would you care to explain what you just demonstrated?" "Gravitational adaptation combat," she replied, her voice calm and even. "Using an opponent's momentum against them." Zarlok's eyes narrowed. "That was more than simple redirection. You anticipated GRX's attack pattern perfectly." Fletcher shrugged. "Dorvian attack patterns are well documented. 17 championships create a lot of footage to study." GRX, now on his feet, looked murderous. "That was a lucky counter. I wasn't fully committed to the attack." "Would you like another demonstration?" Fletcher asked, her tone unchanged. Before GRX could answer, Zarlok stepped between them. "That won't be necessary. Korvik, you're next. Test the human's technique." My hearts began pounding in my chest. As a Vidian, I was naturally faster than GRX, with better spatial awareness and reaction time. Whatever trick the human had used wouldn't work on me. I approached cautiously, circling her as GRX had done, but with more attention to her subtle shifts in weight and breathing. There was something odd about her, a calmness that seemed almost artificial. I reached out with my heightened Vidian senses, trying to detect any change in her body temperature, any variation in her breathing that might telegraph her intentions. Nothing. She was utterly still, perfectly controlled. I feinted left, then struck right, a combination designed to test her reflexes without fully committing. She didn't move at all, until suddenly she did. My attack met empty air, and before I could recover, I felt an irresistible pressure on my center of gravity. The world tilted, and I found myself looking up at the arena ceiling, pinned in a position that somehow neutralized every counter I knew. "Yield," Fletcher said quietly. I yielded immediately, more intrigued than humiliated. As she helped me to my feet, I noticed something peculiar. Her hands were calloused in patterns I'd never seen before, suggesting years of specialized training. "How did you do that?" I asked, as we stepped away from the center. "Efficiency of movement," she replied, then returned to her original position. By now, the entire class was watching with rapt attention. Rakar, who had been observing silently, stepped forward without waiting for Zarlok's invitation. "Professor, allow me to test this technique properly," he said, his voice carrying the natural authority of Zenthi warriors. With his reinforced calcium plating and nearly twice the human's mass, Rakar was the most physically imposing student in our class. Zarlok considered this, then nodded. "Fletcher, are you willing to continue?" "Of course, Professor," she replied, showing no concern about facing our class champion. Rakar took his position, his reinforced scales gleaming under the arena lights. "The mass ratio between us makes your momentum redirection technique impractical," he stated, analytical as always. "You cannot move what you cannot leverage." Fletcher said nothing, maintaining her peculiar non-stance. Rakar attacked with characteristic precision, a Zenthi offensive pattern designed to overwhelm lighter opponents with sheer mass and force. Fletcher didn't attempt to redirect him as she had with GRX and me. Instead, she moved, barely, making minute adjustments that caused Rakar's perfectly executed strikes to miss by millimeters. The Zenthi grew increasingly frustrated as his attacks found only air. He committed more force, more speed, Exactly what Fletcher was waiting for. In a sequence so fluid, it appeared choreographed. She used Rikar's own momentum to send him flying across the arena, where he crashed into the energy barrier with a painful-sounding thud. Before he could recover, Fletcher was beside him, applying pressure to something I couldn't quite see, some kind of neural junction point. I realized, as Rikar's eyes widened in shock. This is a secondary cardiovascular pressure point unique to Zenthi physiology, Fletcher explained, her voice clinical and detached. If you move incorrectly, you risk temporary paralysis of your left side. I suggest you yield. I yield, Rikar managed, his voice strained. The class was dead silent. Professor Zarlox stood motionless, his inner eyelids completely retracted. Class dismissed, he said finally. Fletcher, remain behind. As we filed out, I looked back to see the human girl sitting cross-legged again in the center of the arena, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. What was that? Tekka demanded once we were in the corridor. How did a human defeat Rikar? It's impossible. It's not impossible, I replied slowly, thinking through what I'd witnessed. We just saw it happen. But humans are Class 9 Deathworlders. Pym, or possibly Palm, insisted. They're not supposed to be capable of this level of combat. Something about this didn't add up. I needed more information. I'm going to the library, I announced, breaking away from the group. For what? Tekka called after me. Research. The Academy Library was a mix of holographic interfaces and traditional data storage, a concession to the various learning preferences of different species. I bypassed the general information sections and headed straight for the xenobiology archives. Display all information on human physiology, focusing on combat capabilities. I instructed the system. The data that appeared was sparse, surprisingly so for a Federation member species. I scanned through the basic information. Bipedal mammals, carbon-based, internal skeleton, reinforced with calcium deposits. Relatively high endurance, but unremarkable strength or speed compared to other sapient species. I frowned. Nothing here explained what I'd witnessed in the arena. Display information on Earth, planetary classification and environmental factors. New data shimmered into existence. Earth, classified as a Class 9 death world, characterized by high gravity, 1.0 standard. Extreme temperature variations, diverse and often hostile flora and fauna, frequent natural disasters, and areas of toxic atmosphere. I paused, considering this. Class 9 was certainly respectable. My own homeworld was only Class 7, but not exceptional by Federation standards. The highest known was Class 15, inhabited by the reclusive Droxians, who rarely left their methane-sulfur hellscape of a planet. Computer. Access historical reclassification records for Earth. Access denied. Administrative clearance required. Interesting. Why would planetary classification history require special clearance? Access academic papers regarding human physiological adaptations to Deathworld conditions. The system hesitated, then displayed a series of research papers, most with significant portions redacted. I scrolled through them, looking for anything useful. One caught my attention: redundant organ systems in Class 12+ species. Class 12+? That couldn't be right. Earth was Class 9. I opened the paper and began reading the non-redacted portions. The content was technical, but fascinating, detailing how species from extreme death worlds often developed redundant biological systems to survive catastrophic injuries. The paper specifically mentioned humans' secondary liver functionality, their ability to survive with a single kidney or lung, and the remarkable regenerative properties of their bones and skin. These adaptations, while common in Class 12 and above species, represent an intriguing case study in convergent evolution with lower classified worlds, such as Earth, C9. There was that classification discrepancy again. I continued reading, finding references to humans' unusual pain tolerance, their ability to enter various altered physiological states under extreme stress, and their capacity to temporarily boost physical performance at the cost of later system crash. Computer, access training footage of human martial arts from Earth. Accessing. The holographic display shifted to show humans engaged in various combat forms. I watched, fascinated, as they demonstrated techniques that prioritized efficiency over power, redirection over direct confrontation. Many of these techniques looked similar to what Fletcher had used against GRX and me, but none explained how she had handled Ricard. You won't find what you're looking for in the public archives. I turned to find Fletcher herself, standing at the entrance to my research alcove, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. You're researching me, she stated. I'm researching humans, I corrected. You surprised me today. I gathered that... She stepped into the alcove, glancing at the displays I'd called up. Looking into Earth's classification? There seems to be some inconsistency in the records. Some references indicate Earth might be higher than Class 9. Fletcher nodded, then reached past me to access the terminal. Computer, access file Fletcher J7729. Authorization Echo Tango 12. Access granted. Welcome, Specialist Fletcher. A new set of data appeared. Complete, unredacted information about Earth. I stared in shock at the classification displayed prominently at the top. Deathworld Class 12. That's impossible, I whispered. Class 12 is... Extreme. Fletcher finished for me. High gravity. Atmospheric toxins. Predators capable of killing sapients. Weather patterns that can destroy settlements. Tectonic instability. High radiation levels. And pathogens that constantly evolve to overcome defenses. But the Federation records clearly state. The Federation records were diplomatically adjusted. Fletcher interrupted, her tone matter-of-fact. When Earth joined, our true classification was deemed politically problematic. Other Class 12 species like the Merivians had caused panic upon first contact. The Federation Council decided it would be easier to misclassify Earth as Class 9 to avoid diplomatic complications. I stared at the data, reading about Earth's true conditions. Crushing gravity that built dense muscle and bone structures. Atmospheric oxygen levels that supercharged human metabolism while simultaneously creating fire hazards. Predators that had shaped human evolution through millions of years of survival pressure. Diseases that forced constant adaptation. And environmental extremes that required humans to function in conditions from Arctic cold to desert heat. So you're saying humans are actually... We're Deathworlders, Fletcher confirmed. Real ones. Our bones constantly rebuild themselves. Our skin repairs itself at rates most species find improbable. We can lose significant blood volume and remain functional. Our digestive systems can detoxify substances that would kill most sapients. And our brains are wired for pattern recognition and threat assessment at levels that border on precognition. I thought back to the arena, how she had seemed to anticipate attacks before they happened. That's how you defeated Ricard. You predicted his movements. She nodded. Zenthi attack patterns are energy efficient but predictable. Their neural architecture prioritizes conservation of momentum. Once you understand the underlying biology, the patterns become obvious. And that's what you were doing while sitting still at the beginning of class. I realized. You were studying everyone's movements, identifying biological tells and pattern indicators. Yes. For the first time, Fletcher smiled slightly. Most species broadcast their intentions if you know what to look for. Vidians like you are actually among the hardest to read. Your neuromuscular connections are highly adaptable. I found myself oddly pleased by this assessment. Why are you telling me this? I asked. If Earth's true classification is meant to be secret. Because you were curious enough to look beyond the official story, she replied. And because things are changing in the Federation, keeping humans' capabilities secret isn't sustainable long-term. Before I could respond, both our communication implants chimed simultaneously. All advanced combat students report to the primary arena immediately, came Professor Zarlok's voice. Priority Alpha. Fletcher and I exchanged glances. That's not scheduled training, I said. No, she agreed, already heading for the exit. It's not. The primary arena was the Academy's largest combat facility, typically used only for graduation demonstrations or official Federation events. When Fletcher and I arrived, Professor Zarlox was already there, along with several Federation officials I didn't recognize. Our classmates were gathering in confused clusters. What's happening? I asked Tekka as we joined the group. Visitors, she replied, mandibles clicking nervously. Christian Empire representatives. I felt a chill run through me. The Christian Empire was a powerful faction beyond Federation space, not openly hostile, but certainly not friendly. Their warriors were legendary, their technology advanced, their culture centered around combat prowess and honor. Professor Zarlox stepped forward, his posture unusually formal. Students, we have been honored by a visit from representatives of the Christian Empire. They have expressed interest in observing Federation training methods and have brought one of their junior champions to participate in a demonstration bout. Murmurs spread through our group. The Christians rarely interacted with the Federation, and when they did, it was never without purpose. This is clearly a test, Rakar muttered beside me. They want to assess our combat capabilities. I nodded in agreement. The timing was too convenient to be coincidence. A delegation of Christians entered the arena, massive reptiloid beings with reinforced scales and imposing posture. They moved with the fluid grace of natural predators, their eyes scanning us with undisguised assessment. Their leader, distinguished by elaborate scale markings, stepped forward. We thank the Federation for this opportunity. As a gesture of goodwill, we have brought Dross, one of our promising young warriors, to engage in friendly competition. At his gesture, another Christian stepped forward, younger, but no less imposing. Dross carried himself with absolute confidence. His scales were reinforced with what appeared to be additional calcium deposits, a sign of specialized combat training. We would be honored to see him face your best combatant, the Christian leader continued, his translator giving his words a slightly mechanical quality. Professor Zarlox turned to our group. Rakar, step forward. To my surprise, Rakar hesitated. Professor, with respect, I am not the most suitable opponent. Zarlox's inner eyelids flickered in surprise. You are the Academy's top-ranked combatant. I was, Rakar corrected, then gestured toward Fletcher. Until today. All eyes turned to the human girl, who stood quietly at the edge of our group. Professor Zarlox studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fletcher, you will represent the Academy. The Christian delegation studied the small human with obvious skepticism. Their leader's mouth moved in what might have been their equivalent of a dismissive smile. A human? We were expecting to face a more substantial opponent. Fletcher is our current top-ranked combatant, Zarlox stated firmly. She will provide an adequate demonstration of Federation techniques. The Christian leader looked unimpressed, but nodded his agreement. Very well. Standard rules. Yield or incapacitation determines the victor. No permanent damage is to be inflicted. Fletcher stepped into the center of the arena, assuming her characteristic non-stance, relaxed, arms at her sides, expression neutral. Across from her, Dross took a formal combat position, his reinforced limbs positioned for both offense and defense. Begin when ready, Zarlox announced. Dross didn't waste time. He charged forward with shocking speed for his size, clearly intending to overwhelm the much smaller human with raw power. Fletcher waited until the last possible moment before stepping slightly to the side, just enough for Dross to miss his primary strike. The Christian recovered quickly, spinning with practiced precision to deliver a secondary attack. Again, Fletcher made a minimal adjustment, causing the blow to miss by millimeters. Frustration began to show in Dross's movements as attack after attack failed to connect. "She's doing it again," Tekka whispered beside me. "The same technique she used against Ricard." "Not exactly," I replied, watching closely. "She's adapting to his specific biology. Look at how she's targeting his balance points." Indeed, Fletcher was making microscopic adjustments with each exchange, slowly positioning Dross exactly where she wanted him. The Christian, growing increasingly frustrated, committed to a powerful overhead strike that left him momentarily off balance. That was all Fletcher needed. She stepped inside his guard, redirected his momentum with a touch so subtle I barely saw it, and suddenly Dross was face down on the arena floor. Before he could recover, Fletcher was applying pressure to what appeared to be a neural junction point at the base of his skull. "This is your secondary cardiovascular regulation node," she informed him quietly. "If you attempt to rise without proper adjustment, you risk temporary but complete cardiovascular collapse. I suggest you yield." The arena was utterly silent. The Cretan delegation stood frozen, expressions unreadable. After what seemed an eternity, Dross spoke. "I yield." Fletcher immediately released him and stepped back, returning to her neutral stance. She offered a hand to help him up, a human gesture of respect that seemed to confuse the Cretan warrior. After a moment's hesitation, Dross accepted her assistance and rose to his feet. "How did you know about the cardiovascular node?" he demanded. "That information is not shared outside Christian training academies." "Comparative xenobiology," Fletcher replied simply. "Your species' anatomy follows predictable evolutionary patterns based on your planetary conditions and predator-prey dynamics." The Christian leader stepped forward, his posture rigid with what might have been shock or anger. "Most impressive, human. It seems the Federation has been modest about the capabilities of its newest member species." Professor Zarlox intervened smoothly. "We value all our member species for their unique contributions. Humans have proven particularly adaptable to diverse combat methodologies." The Christian leader's eyes narrowed. "Indeed. We look forward to further exchanges with the Federation. Perhaps next time, we will bring a more experienced champion." "We would welcome the opportunity," Zarlox replied diplomatically. After the Christian delegation departed, a buzz of excited conversation filled the arena. Professor Zarlox raised a hand for silence. "Today's events were unexpected but educational," he announced. "Fletcher has demonstrated advanced application of cross-species combat principles, precisely what this class is designed to teach. Beginning tomorrow, she will assist me in instructing this technique." Shocked murmurs ran through the group. A student, especially a human, serving as an assistant instructor, was unprecedented. "Fletcher, remain behind to discuss the curriculum," Zarlox continued. "The rest of you are dismissed." As we filed out, I noticed the other students looking at Fletcher with new eyes, respect replacing the earlier dismissal and derision. Even GRX seemed thoughtful, rather than resentful. "Did you know?" Tekka asked me as we headed back to the dormitories. "About humans. I mean—" "Not until today," I admitted. "But I'm beginning to think we've all underestimated them." "Underestimated is an understatement," Ricard interjected, falling into step beside us. I reviewed Fletcher's technique after our bout. Her understanding of Zenthi physiology exceeds that of many of our own medical professionals. "What does this mean for the class?" Pym or Palm asked. "For the academy?" "It means we need to reconsider our assumptions," I replied. "About humans, about each other, about combat itself." The next morning, we arrived at the training arena to find Fletcher already there, conferring quietly with Professor Zarlox. When we had all assembled, Zarlox stepped forward. "Today begins a new phase in your training," he announced. "Fletcher will demonstrate the principles of efficiency-based combat, techniques that rely on understanding opponent biology rather than raw strength or speed. Fletcher moved to the center of the arena. The first principle is observation, she began, her voice clear and confident. Before engaging any opponent, you must understand their biomechanical structure, their movement patterns, their biological imperatives. She gestured for me to join her. Korvik, please demonstrate a standard Vidian striking sequence. I complied, executing a series of rapid strikes that showcased Vidian speed and precision. Notice how Korvik's neuromuscular structure creates microtells before each strike. Fletcher explained to the class. The slight tension in the secondary dorsal muscle group, the minor pupil dilation, the shift in balance that precedes the weight transfer. I was startled. I hadn't been aware of these tells myself. Every species has similar indicators, she continued, even those with exoskeletons or non-standard anatomies. The key is learning to recognize them and respond appropriately. For the next hour, Fletcher guided us through exercises designed to identify and exploit these biological indicators. To my surprise, she was an excellent teacher, patient, detailed, and adept at adapting explanations to different learning styles. The second principle is efficiency, she explained, after we had mastered the basic observation techniques. Combat isn't about who is strongest or fastest. It's about who can apply force most effectively. She demonstrated by having GRX attempt to move her, using his full strength. Despite his superior mass and power, she remained immovable, somehow dispersing his force through subtle adjustments in her stance. Kinetic chaining, she explained, allows you to redirect incoming force rather than resisting it directly. This makes your opponent's strength irrelevant or, better yet, turns it against them. By the end of the session, even the most skeptical students were engaged, asking questions and practicing the techniques with obvious interest. I found myself particularly absorbed, discovering aspects of my own biology I'd never consciously recognized. As the class dispersed for the day, I approached Fletcher. That was illuminating, I said. I've never thought about combat that way before. She smiled slightly. Most species don't. They rely on their evolutionary advantages, strength, speed, natural weapons, rather than developing efficiency. But humans had to develop efficiency because Earth is more dangerous than you let on, I guessed. Precisely. Her expression grew more serious. When your planet is constantly trying to kill you, you learn to use every advantage, no matter how small. Why keep it secret? Why let the Federation misclassify Earth? Fletcher hesitated, then sighed. Politics. When humans first made contact, the Federation was concerned about our adaptations. Species from high-class Deathworlds have historically been problematic, aggressive, difficult to integrate, sometimes destabilizing. By accepting a lower classification, Earth avoided restrictions on population movement, technology access, and political representation. But now things are changing, she replied. The Christian Empire is expanding. The Federation needs every advantage it can get, including properly trained Deathworlders. Over the following weeks, our training transformed. Fletcher and Professor Zarlox worked together to develop a curriculum that combined traditional, species-specific techniques with Fletcher's efficiency-based approach. We learned to identify biological weaknesses, to move with minimal energy expenditure, to think of combat as a problem to solve rather than a contest of strength. Most surprising was how quickly the class dynamic changed. The initial skepticism toward Fletcher, and by extension, all humans, gave way to respect and even admiration. GRX, once dismissive, became one of her most dedicated students. Ricard worked closely with her to adapt Zenthi techniques to incorporate her efficiency principles. I found myself spending more time with Fletcher outside class, discussing combat theory and sharing insights about our respective worlds. She was surprisingly open about Earth, its dangers, its beauty, the way it had shaped human development. The thing most non-humans don't understand, she told me during one such conversation, is that Earth didn't just make us physically resilient. It shaped our thinking. When you evolve on a planet where literally everything can kill you, weather, animals, plants, microbes, even the ground beneath your feet, you develop a certain perspective. What kind of perspective? I asked. Adaptability, she replied. Humans don't excel at any one thing. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most durable, but we can adapt to almost anything, and we're very, very good at finding weaknesses. I thought about this. That's what you did in our first class. You found everyone's weaknesses before they even knew you were looking. She nodded. It's instinctive for us. Pattern recognition, threat assessment, exploitation of vulnerability. On Earth. Those who couldn't do these things didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. It's a little terrifying, I admitted. Fletcher laughed, a sound I'd rarely heard from her. That's why the Federation downplayed our classification. No one wants to admit they invited apex predators to join their peaceful alliance. Before I could respond, both our communication implants chimed with an urgent alert. All advanced combat students report to the briefing hall immediately. Emergency protocols in effect. Fletcher was on her feet instantly, her posture shifting subtly into what I now recognized as combat readiness. That's not a drill, she said. The briefing hall was already filled with Academy staff and students when we arrived. Professor Zarlox stood at the front, his expression grave. We have received intelligence that the Christian Empire is planning a significant military demonstration near Federation space, he announced without preamble. Their fleet movements suggest they may be testing our response capabilities. Holographic displays activated, showing Christian warships positioning themselves along the border. Federation defense projections indicated several vulnerable colonies within striking distance. The Federation Council has requested that the Academy prepare a delegation to attend emergency diplomatic talks. Zarlox continued. This delegation will include Advanced Combat Class 7, as your recent interaction with Christian representatives makes you uniquely qualified. Murmurs of surprise and concern spread through the room. This was unprecedented. Students were never involved in active diplomatic situations. This is clearly another test, Rakar stated, voicing what many of us were thinking. The Christians want to assess our capabilities more thoroughly. Correct, Zarlox agreed. Which is why your preparation will be crucial. Fletcher, given your performance against their champion, you will be the primary combatant should any further demonstrations be requested. I glanced at Fletcher, expecting to see anxiety or at least concern. Instead, her expression was calm, focused, the same expression she'd worn before facing Dross. When do we depart? She asked. 12 hours, Zarlox replied. Prepare accordingly. As the briefing concluded, our class gathered to discuss the situation. The mood was tense but determined. The Christians respect strength above all, GRX noted. They're testing us because they're considering us as either potential threats or potential conquests. Or potential allies, Fletcher suggested. Don't assume their intentions are entirely hostile. They could be assessing compatibility. Either way, they'll be watching everything we do. I added, every movement, every reaction. They're studying us, just as we're studying them. Then we give them something worth studying, Fletcher said, her voice firm. Zarlox, what exactly are they requesting? Another combat demonstration, the professor replied. But this time with their senior champion, a warrior named Kral, who has never been defeated in formal combat. Fletcher nodded thoughtfully. I'll need to study Cretan physiology more thoroughly. Their neural structure, particularly the secondary nervous system, has vulnerabilities I only glimpsed during the bout with Dross. I'll help, I offered. Vidian sensory capabilities might pick up details you'd miss. Good, Fletcher agreed. Rakar, I need you to recall everything you observed about Dross's movement patterns. GRX. Work with the twins on potential counter-strategies, based on what we know about Christian combat forms. Just like that. She had taken command, not through assertion of authority, but through natural leadership. More surprising was how readily everyone accepted it. The 12 hours passed quickly. Fletcher and I spent most of it in the Academy's xenobiology lab, reviewing everything available on Christian physiology and combat techniques. The more we learned, the more concerned I became. There, senior champions undergo biological augmentation, I noted, reviewing a classified report. Reinforced skeletal structure, enhanced muscular density, neural accelerators, standard Deathworld adaptations, Fletcher replied absently, studying a three-dimensional model of Christian neural pathways, though artificially induced rather than evolved. You don't seem worried. She glanced up at me, her expression thoughtful. Worried? No. Focused? Yes. Kral will be significantly more challenging than Dross. But the principles remain the same. Every biological system has limitations and vulnerabilities. The key is finding them before he finds mine. And if you can't? Fletcher's lips curved in a slight smile. Then I improvise. Another human specialty. The diplomatic vessel that transported us to the meeting location was the largest spacecraft I'd ever boarded. A Federation diplomatic cruiser equipped with both luxury accommodations and state-of-the-art defense systems. Our class was assigned a spacious suite of rooms near the command center, presumably so we could be quickly accessed if needed. Impressive, Tekka commented as we settled in. They're really taking this seriously. As they should, Rakar replied. Cretan fleet movements have increased by 37% in the past cycle. Their production of battle cruisers has doubled. All indicators point to preparation for expansionist action. Or defensive positioning, Fletcher countered. Their border with the Mycelian Collective has been increasingly unstable. This could be precautionary. Before the debate could continue, a Federation diplomatic officer entered our suite. We will arrive at the neutral station in approximately 2 hours. You will be expected to attend the initial diplomatic reception, after which the combat demonstration will take place. Fletcher, you will need to prepare according to formal protocol. Fletcher nodded, her expression revealing nothing. After the officer left, GRX approached her. Are you certain you're prepared? Kral is legendary. Some say he's killed opponents even in supposedly non-lethal demonstrations. I am aware of his reputation, Fletcher replied calmly. And yes, I'm prepared. How can you be so confident? Palm asked, her exoskeletal plates clicking nervously. Fletcher considered the question for a moment. On Earth, there's a concept called the Quiet Ones. It refers to predators that don't display aggression unnecessarily. They conserve energy, observe, and strike only when success is assured. She smiled slightly. Humans tend to be the quiet ones. 2 hours later, we docked at the neutral station, an enormous structure floating in unclaimed space between Federation and Cretan territory. The station's architecture was deliberately impressive, with soaring ceilings and transparent walls that showcased the starfield beyond. The diplomatic reception was already underway when we arrived, filled with representatives from both the Federation and the Christian Empire. The contrast was striking, Federation diplomats in their diverse forms and colorful formal attire, Christians uniformly imposing in their military-style regalia. Professor Zarlox guided us through the proper protocols, introducing us to key figures from both sides. The Christian representatives studied us with undisguised assessment, their attention lingering particularly on Fletcher. So this is the human who defeated Dross, one of them commented, circling Fletcher with predatory interest. Smaller than I expected. Size is rarely the determining factor in combat effectiveness, Fletcher replied diplomatically. The Christian's mouth formed that same dismissive expression I'd seen before. Perhaps against an inexperienced opponent like Dross, Kral will present a significantly different challenge. I look forward to the demonstration, Fletcher said, her tone perfectly balanced between respect and confidence. The reception continued for another hour before the announcement came. All participants and observers to the demonstration arena, please. The arena was smaller than the academies, but no less impressive, with advanced energy barriers and monitoring systems. A sizable audience had gathered: diplomats, military personnel, and what appeared to be high-ranking officials from both factions. Kral entered from the opposite side of the arena, and I immediately understood why even GRX had seemed concerned. The Cretan champion was massive, his scales enhanced with what looked like metallic reinforcement, his movements displaying the fluid precision of a natural killer who had honed his skills to perfection. Fletcher, by contrast, appeared almost fragile as she took her position. She wore the simple training uniform of the academy, unadorned and utilitarian. Her stance was the same as always, relaxed, neutral, giving away nothing. A Federation official stepped forward to announce the rules. This demonstration will continue until one participant yields or is rendered unable to continue. Lethal force is expressly prohibited. Both participants have agreed to these terms. Kral's expression suggested he found these restrictions amusing rather than binding. Begin when ready, the official stated, then quickly moved clear of the arena. Unlike Dross, Kral didn't immediately attack. He circled Fletcher slowly, studying her with the patience of an experienced predator. Fletcher mirrored his movements, maintaining distance while conducting her own assessment. The tension in the arena was palpable. Even the diplomats had fallen silent, watching the dangerous dance unfold. When Kral finally moved, it was with shocking speed. He feinted left, then struck right, a testing blow rather than a committed attack. Fletcher evaded with minimal movement, just as she had against Dross, but Kral was already adjusting, his secondary strike coming from an unexpected angle. Fletcher barely avoided it, and for the first time, I saw her truly challenged. Kral pressed his advantage, driving her back with a series of precisely calculated attacks that left little room for her usual redirection technique. He's studied her methods, Ricard murmured beside me. He's deliberately avoiding commitment to any strike that could be redirected. I nodded, watching with growing concern as Fletcher was forced into increasingly defensive maneuvers. Kral was systematically cutting off her options, using his superior reach and strength to control the space between them. Then I noticed something, a pattern in Fletcher's movements. She wasn't just retreating, she was positioning herself and Kral in a specific configuration relative to the arena floor. She's still in control, I whispered to Ricard. Watch her footwork. Indeed. Despite appearing defensive, Fletcher was executing a complex sequence of positions that gradually maneuvered Kral exactly where she wanted him. When she finally made her move, it came as a surprise to everyone, including, crucially, Kral. Fletcher stepped inside his guard, moving so close that his longer reach became a disadvantage rather than an asset. Before he could adjust, she executed a sequence of precise strikes to what I now recognized as neural junction points. Kral's right side suddenly went rigid, throwing him off balance. Fletcher didn't hesitate. She used his momentary disorientation to execute a throw that sent the much larger Christian crashing to the arena floor. Before he could recover, she was applying pressure to the same cardiovascular regulation node she had identified in Dross, but with a more sophisticated technique that caused Kral's breathing to become visibly labored. This pressure point affects your tertiary respiratory system, Fletcher explained, her voice calm despite the intensity of the situation. I can maintain this hold indefinitely, without causing permanent damage, but you will find it increasingly uncomfortable. I suggest you yield. For a moment, it seemed Kral might refuse. His expression was one of disbelief and rage. Then, Slowly, he nodded. I yield, he growled, the words clearly painful to pronounce. Fletcher immediately released him and stepped back, offering the same gesture of respect she had shown Druss. After a moment of visible internal struggle, Kral accepted her hand and rose to his feet. The arena erupted in a cacophony of reactions. Federation representatives applauding, Christians conferring urgently among themselves, analysts from both sides furiously documenting what they had witnessed. Impossible! I heard a Christian official mutter nearby. Kral has never been defeated in formal combat. How could a human... Perhaps we have underestimated our Federation colleagues, another Christian replied, their tone thoughtful rather than dismissive. Professor Zarlox approached Fletcher, his inner eyelids fully retracted in what I now recognized as his expression of extreme approval. Excellent demonstration, Fletcher. The Federation Council will be most pleased with the outcome. Fletcher nodded, but her attention remained on Kral, who was studying her with newfound intensity. Your technique is unexpected, the Christian champion acknowledged. I would know more of it. Perhaps that can be arranged, Fletcher replied diplomatically. As part of ongoing cultural exchange between our peoples. The significance of this exchange wasn't lost on anyone present. What had begun as a test of strength had somehow transformed into an opening for dialogue. The diplomatic meetings that followed were closed to students, but the outcomes were soon apparent. The Christian fleet began withdrawing from its provocative positions along the border. Joint training initiatives were proposed. Cultural exchanges were scheduled. When we returned to the academy, everything had changed. Our class was no longer just another group of combat students. We were now seen as having played a role in a significant diplomatic breakthrough. Fletcher, in particular, had become something of a celebrity. The quiet girl from Earth who defeated the undefeatable Christian, as the Academy newsfeeds put it. More importantly, the attitude toward humans throughout the Academy had transformed. Where once they had been dismissed as minor additions to the Federation, they were now studied with new respect and interest. Professor Zarlox made Fletcher's assistant instructor position permanent, expanding her role to include lectures on xenobiology and combat psychology. Students from other classes began requesting transfers to study under her. As for our original class, we had become something of a unit, bound together by our shared experience and the knowledge we now possessed about each other's true capabilities. I still don't understand why you didn't demonstrate your abilities from the beginning, I said to Fletcher one evening as we reviewed training footage together. Why sit quietly and let everyone underestimate you? She considered this, her expression thoughtful. Partly training, on Earth, revealing your capabilities unnecessarily is considered tactically unsound. But mostly, she paused. Mostly, I was curious. Curious about how you would react when your assumptions were challenged, whether you could adapt your thinking when faced with evidence that contradicted your beliefs. She smiled slightly. It's an important quality in potential allies. And did we pass your test? You're asking the wrong question, Fletcher replied. The real question is whether the Federation, with all its diverse species and capabilities, can become more than the sum of its parts. Whether we can learn from each other instead of just coexisting. I thought about how our class had transformed, how GRX now incorporated human efficiency principles into Dorvian combat forms, how Raykar and Fletcher had developed new techniques that combined Zenthi strength with human adaptability, how the twins had created synchronized patterns based on human kinetic chaining. I think we're off to a promising start, I said. The next day, our class gathered for a special training session. Fletcher had prepared a new curriculum that incorporated elements from all our species' combat traditions, synthesized into something entirely new. The Christians are regrouping, she informed us. They've accepted the diplomatic resolution for now, but they'll be back, stronger, better prepared. Having learned from this encounter, we need to be ready. Ready to fight? Tekka asked. Ready to adapt, Fletcher corrected. Combat is just one form of competition. The real challenge is evolving faster than your opponent, whether in battle, in diplomacy, or in cooperation. She moved to the center of the training arena, assuming that deceptively simple stance that I now recognized as anything but passive. In the Federation, the Quiet Ones can be the most formidable weapon of all, she said. Now, let's begin. As we took our positions around her, I reflected on how dramatically my understanding had changed, of humans, of combat, of adaptation itself. The galaxy was larger and more dangerous than I had imagined, but also filled with more possibilities. And watching Fletcher begin her demonstration, efficient, precise, adaptable, I felt a new certainty. Whatever challenges awaited us, we would face them together, each contributing our unique strengths to a whole that was becoming greater than the sum of its parts. The Deathworlder girl who had once sat quietly in the corner was now at the center, not because she had conquered, but because she had connected, showing us all how to become stronger through understanding rather than dominance. In that moment, I understood what truly made humans dangerous. Not their Deathworld physiology or their combat techniques, but their ability to transform adversaries into allies, challenges into opportunities, and differences into strengths. The Quiet Ones, indeed,